Israel's offensive on Gaza has been an opportunity for Europe's far right to show its solidarity with Benjamin Netanyahu's government. So, just how far will the region's far right go in supporting Israel? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the political landscape of Europe is shifting. Last month's European Parliament elections saw an historic number of far-right candidates being elected. So, how does this shift affect European policy and attitudes towards Israel and its war on Gaza?
The rise of a far-right Europe is having a ripple effect on the war in Gaza. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders' Party for Freedom signed a coalition agreement agreeing to look for the appropriate time for moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
For me and my political party, it's not difficult to see with whom we stand in solidarity. Are we with the Jewish people? Or are we with the scum who want to exterminate them? And I tell you, until the very end, I support the state of Israel.
According to Gaza's Ministry of Health, more than 38,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel's war in Gaza. But a recent Lancet study has revealed that Gaza's death toll could exceed 186,000 or more. Despite these alarming figures, many far-right European parties have come out in support of Israel. Marco Zanni, leader of the far-right Identity and Democracy Party at the European Parliament, described Hamas's attack on October 7th as an act of war on the entire West. Germany's far-right party, Alternative for Germany, has been calling for a cut in aid and funding for Palestinians since October, but all parliamentary proposals were rejected. In Spain, Santiago Abascal, leader of the far-right Vox Party, voiced his opposition to his country's recognition of a Palestinian state. As Europe lurches to the right, will Israel find itself new allies?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Belfast is Ciaran Browne. He's an assistant professor of conflict resolution and reconciliation. That's at Trinity College, Dublin. In Barcelona, we find Denijal Jegic. He is an assistant professor of communication at the Lebanese American University in Beirut. And I'm delighted to say that here with me in the studio is Yousef Alhelou. He's a Palestinian journalist and political analyst. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Ciaran, I'll come to you first of all. Just give me your take on the rise of the right in Europe and what it means for the people of Palestine.
Well, thanks, as always, Enda, for having me on. It's obviously a concern. It's very worrying. Actually, yesterday I was watching some quite distressing scenes coming out of Dublin, and we saw the far right mobilising against asylum seekers and policies that were being implemented in the south. So it's clear that there is a real problem and a real spike across Europe. But of course, then we also see the pushback, and we saw that very clearly recently during the French elections. But in terms of what it means for the people of Palestine, I think it's very clear since October, and in fact, for lots and lots of time beforehand, Europe has really let down Palestine. Europe has really not upheld the principles of international law, has not done more to hold the Israeli state responsible for decades of crimes being committed against the Palestinian people, has not done more to push for meaningful justice-oriented resolution to the situation on the ground in Palestine. So right or left, I don't think we can necessarily pin this all on the rise of extremist groups at this moment in time. It has been the case that Europe has not upheld its role and its responsibility when it comes to, as I said before, realizing a justice-oriented future for the people of Palestine.
Denijal, that's an interesting point Brenda makes there, isn't it? That Europe has really let down the people of Palestine.
Absolutely. And I think it has been very clear for the past decades that Europe, in many ways, especially when it comes to its foreign policy, has functioned as a proxy of the United States. So Given the political discourse that we've seen in the European Union, its very staunch support for the Israeli regime, we wouldn't have been able to even expect any sort of support for Palestinians. The EU has now for decades been recycling its own discourse about the so-called two-state solution, about the so-called peace process and negotiations, and has really been filling its foreign policy with a lot of void concepts on the discourse, but a continuous support for the ongoing Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank and continuous military occupation. So the European Union's reaction to October 7 and this ongoing genocide is unfortunately unsurprising. So I think these very flawed policies of the EU currently during this ongoing catastrophe in Gaza and in Palestine show once again the imbalance in this international system.
Yousef, regular viewers of Roundtable will know that you are from Gaza and your family are still there. Just give us an update, if you will, on how they're doing.
Well, unfortunately, genocide is ongoing for the past 9 months. My family, like the rest of the population, are still enduring the brunt of this genocide, which is designed to crush the steadfastness of the Palestinians and to kill as many civilians as possible. A good Palestinian is a dead Palestinian in Israel's eyes. When you have Israeli officials describe Palestinians as human animals, and they describe Palestinian children as children of darkness, and when you have Israeli officials, army officials, Netanyahu himself, Biden, supported by the West, say that they believe these lies, then you have a genocide like no other. The first digital genocide being streamed for the past 9 months. Starvation is ongoing, bombing hospitals, schools, United Nations schools, bombing an entire refugee site just to take out 2 men. And then Israel says that they have a right for self-defense. What about the Palestinians? What's happening in Gaza is a form of collective punishment. It's an ethnic cleansing. And it seems that the world has normalized this genocide.
How do you feel then when you see right-wing and far-right parties in Europe getting millions and millions of votes, and you know that they align themselves very much with Israel?
It's very distressing that the world plays double standards. It's a test for those European officials who won the elections to see if they care about the human rights, if they will deal with, for example, oppressed nations like in Gaza, Palestine, in a good way. It's very worrying that the world is shifted towards, racism. Let's say we do not generalize, but also on the other side, we have positive signs that the left is winning somehow in some parts of Europe. It seems now this also been affected by the U.S. foreign policy. We have the U.S. influence in Eastern Europe. But as a matter of fact, millions of people in Europe, they have been marching, demonstrating, calling for the end of the genocide and saying that it's time for Europe to recognize Palestine as a state.
Well, one of the most prominent far-right voices in European politics wrote this on social media. This is Geert Wilders, leader of the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands. And he wrote recently, "Keep strong, my Israeli friends, in fighting Hamas. The UN, USA, and Europe don't understand you are fighting an existential war against the dark forces of hate and destruction called Hamas. I'll always support you." He's not alone either, Brendan, is he? I mean, Wilders and many other far-right leaders in Europe completely support Israel.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that is absolutely the case. But again, I want to make sure that we're very clear here that there are plenty of non-so-called far-right leaders who are continuing to support Israel. They might be doing it in a let's say a less vocal way. But I mean, the first foreign trip that the new UK Foreign Secretary made was to Israel to shake hands with Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who stands accused of war crimes and genocide and has arrest warrants issued against him. So, I mean, we can certainly absolutely pontificate about the rise of the far right, but equally we have to be very clear here that there is plenty of support across Europe for what has been going on. I mean, certainly there have been words and calls for ceasefire coming out more vocally at this time, but words alone really don't cut it at this stage. There needs to be far more direct, concrete action. There needs to be a complete arms embargo implemented now. There needs to be a real push towards bringing this devastation and this utter Western-sponsored carnage to a close. Other than that, then yes, we can say that there's the far right is the issue or whatever else, but there's plenty of opprobrium to go around here. And
Daniel, we've seen several prominent European countries in recent months come out and recognise the state of Palestine, from Ireland to Norway, Spain, and Slovenia. How worried do you think the Israelis are about more European countries following suit?
Well, the Israelis might be worried, but at the same time, we need to keep in mind and also very critically investigate to what extent this recognition of the state of Palestine diplomatically even has any influence, especially given the ongoing genocide in Gaza. These four countries that recently recognized Palestine have, if we look at the communication, of the political communication from these governments, not really departed from the EU discourse. They said that they were determined to continue the so-called peace process, which again only exists in the Western imagination, while Palestinians continue to be massacred by the Israeli regime. So to some extent, the current focus that there has been on the recognition might also have the negative impact that it may distract from the actual ongoing problem. And even following the recognition of Palestine by these four states, no additional steps have been initiated. So I think as long as the Israeli regime has the support of the White House and of Washington, D.C., it doesn't have to be worried that the European Union as a collective will depart from its nearly unconditional support.
Yousef, that's a good point. Does Israel care in the slightest what anyone in Europe, right or left, thinks about it?
No, Daniel is right. I think it's to do with the US. As long as the US issues its vetoes, then Palestinian rights will be denied. We've seen this numerous times. But Europe's credibility is at stake. If Europe is not able to stop Israel's genocide, then how they are able to pressure Israel to allow Palestinians to have their sovereign Palestinian state? I think Europe, especially the Britain, the UK, which gave Israel's gave Jews a state in Palestine at the expense of the suffering of the Palestinian people. If they are not willing to take up their role and responsibility, then they cannot be trusted. But we hope, Palestinians hope, the world hope, that Europe will counter the U.S. hegemony. The U.S. cannot, deny Palestinians the right to have a state.
Back to you on that issue, Brendan. Do you think the Israelis care in the slightest? That question I just put to Yousef. They can do anything they want pretty much, so long as America backs them.
yeah, and that has played out now for the last devastating, the last 9 months, which have been absolutely devastating to bear witness to. It's very clear, even when they were talking about, trying to push for ceasefire or whatever else, they were still signing off on huge arms deals to the Israelis. They were vetoing any opportunity to bring this to an end. They were blocking meaningful aid from entering the Gaza Strip. They were providing political cover on the international arena. The Israelis do not care one jot what anybody in Europe thinks. They care absolutely what the Americans think, because they have that level of support. And I think that's really critical, and that's something we need to be very cognizant of and very sensitive to. It's why, as Yousef rightly pointed out, it's why we have had such a strong response from people on the ground across America and across Europe as well, trying to bring our governments to bear on this issue and to try and hold them responsible for what's going on. So the simple fact of the matter is the Israelis do not care until the Americans change their tune on this. And hopefully that will be something that comes sooner rather than later. And then we can get back to the conversations around rebuilding and what that looks like in terms of statehood. I mean, that's for the Palestinian people to decide. That's for all Palestinians everywhere to have a say in what a future state may or may not look like. It's not for people on the outside, which has always been the problem, to impose a colonial peace upon the people in Palestine. So it remains to be seen, and I hope we get to that point really a lot quicker than it seems to be happening at this moment.
Daniel, in addition to all the millions of votes for right and far right politicians in Europe, we're seeing an increasingly confident Donald Trump ahead of November's election. If America chooses Trump, what do you think that gives Israel in terms of a message for continuing its campaign and war in Gaza?
Well, the question really is whether it makes a difference currently for the situation in Gaza. Who is president in the United States? The regime of Joe Biden has provided unconditional support for this genocide and has displayed very clearly that there is no red line for the Israeli genocide and the war crimes that are being committed. Donald Trump, obviously, during his previous term as president, has gone a step farther to some extent by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and has in his political communication maybe been more of openly and aggressively Zionist. But there isn't really much of a difference, even if we look at the debate that happened between the two candidates, where Donald Trump used the term Palestinian as a slur, and there was basically very much a competition of who supports Israel more. So unfortunately, regardless of who of those two candidates should both compete in November, wins the elections, there will be no stop to the Israeli genocide given the current circumstances. So it wouldn't make much of a difference.
Yousef, who would you rather be in the White House after November? Does it make any difference to the people of Gaza?
Not at all. There are different faces for the same currency. Trump, who he was the president who moved the Israeli embassy, American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think they will all support Israel and they will ignore the suffering of the Palestinian people. And this is the sad reality. But we are hopeful that the awakening that is taking place inside the United States, the encampments, young people are taken up to the streets. There is awareness campaigns going on, and I think this will change at some point.
Brendan, I was in France recently. We were filming Roundtable after the French elections, and when the left won the majority of seats in the vote, I was in Place de la République, and you could not help but notice the amount of Palestinian flags. I mean, even though France as a country has been supporting Israel, and there is a lot of votes there for Marine Le Pen and right-wing parties and far right, the left in France are firmly behind the people of Palestine.
Absolutely, and I watched that as the results came through, and I actually sent a tweet that evening saying, that there were Palestinian flags everywhere during the celebrations. It was absolutely powerful and inspirational, and that's the way it's been for so many months of what's been happening. The people, as has been pointed out, the people have been on the streets in our thousands, in our hundreds of thousands, demanding that our governments do more. I mean, the governments are not the people, and that's really critical. And so, yes, I don't want to be uber cynical here. And there was a sense that perhaps with this possible shift in politics in France, whatever, there might signal a change here, and there might be an opportunity. And Mélenchon did come out and make reference to Palestine when he spoke on stage, and so it is really important that we hold on to that hope and see that as an opportunity as well. But it's always important that we remember that we, as the people, hold the power to change, and we need to keep going and keep being steadfast in this moment. We need to take our lessons from the Palestinian people on the ground, who give us direction and give us hope every day with their own steadfastness and determination. And it's truly humbling to listen to these stories. So let's hope that there is a change, and let's hope that we see this brutal devastation come to an end sooner rather than later.
Daniel, do you feel the people of Gaza in particular have been badly let down by European political leaders?
Absolutely. I also think the European political leaders have been complicit in the ongoing genocide in Gaza, not just since October 7, but Europe's policy towards Palestine in the last decade has laid the foundation for made these conditions possible for what we're witnessing right now. So, and I think since October 7, it has become even more clear and transparently so that there is no hope for Gaza from anyone within the European political elite. Also because while European countries are mostly parliamentary democracies, elected leaders continues to support the Israeli regime, and oftentimes in contradiction to the will of the people. And we've seen in the large protests with hundreds of thousands of people in major European cities throughout the last month of people proclaiming their solidarity with Palestine, protesting against their government support in this genocide. And so that only has led to some European governments further suppressing freedom of speech when it comes to Palestine and policing Palestinians in Europe. In addition to that, so Europe has made it very clear that collectively it stands very much on the wrong side of history, even though it continues to proclaim itself as a defender of freedom and democracy in this world.
Yousef, you regularly attend marches in London, in Belfast, in Dublin, calling for a ceasefire. How does it make you feel when you hear right-wing politicians in the UK describe these marches as hate marches?
Especially the former Home Minister, Suella Braverman. Unfortunately, these people, they live in a mirage, and they stress once again that they are hypocritical figures, and they play the double standard card. They do not see Palestinians as human beings. Palestinians are not white, and these people, they try to prove that they are king more than the king himself. Unfortunately, we live in the rule of the jungle, and these people, they just want to appease the right-wing, wave. What I would like to say is that if Israel collapses, then this will cause instability in Europe. That's why America, the West, they are in favor of making sure Israel survives its existence, because Israel is the last remnant of colonialism.
Brendan, I'll just come back to you. I know we're seeing millions and millions more people voting for right-wing and far-right politicians in Europe. The UK has just returned a centre-left government with a huge majority. Do you think long-term the policy towards Israel might shift now that Keir Starmer is in Downing Street?
Well, I mean, that Labour Party that maybe once was centre-left no longer exists. I firmly believe that this is an extension of the Tory party, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't see all that much difference between Keir Starmer and what his policies are and what he's promoting. I mean, some of the things he has said in the last 9 months have been truly shocking. I mean, this is a man who said that Israel did have the right to cut off water, electricity, power to the people of Gaza. This is a man who clearly needs to read up on international humanitarian law. So, no, I don't have particularly strong hope that this Labour Party will do a great deal of difference. I think it would be complacent of us in the movement to say, well, it's all in hand now, the Labour Party are in power. That's not going to happen. And actually what you did see in the immediate aftermath of the Labour Party landslide, okay, the landslide is how they referred to it. What you did see was a huge turnout on the streets of London at the Palestine Solidarity Campaign march to say, look, we know our job is not done here. We know we still have to hold their feet to the fire. So we will remain to be seen. And certainly the idea that the Labour Party is a centre-left party, not anymore. And
Daniel, weeks have turned into months, and we're not that far away from the first anniversary of Israel's war in Gaza. Do you think history will judge Europe's politicians very, very badly for what they've done?
I think so. It remains to be seen, but of course, this is a major crisis for Europe, and the consequences of this will be felt. As Yousef said, Israel is what we still see of colonialism in this world, and we could argue it is maybe the most advanced colonial regime in modern history that basically unites all of these European fantasies of white supremacy and racism, and is exercising this genocide right now. But a lot of European identity and a lot of what Europe bases itself on is visible here. And I think the future will show again how damaging this will be for Europe, and the consequences will be felt, because we've seen once again that Europe continues very proudly so to support apartheid and in this case, a genocide, which is now being, unfortunately, it's very sad to say, being live streamed for several months, and I think this is unprecedented in history.
Yousef, just a final point. You mentioned Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, Conservative politician in the UK. That government is now gone. Anyone who cares about the Palestinian people will not miss that Conservative group of politicians, will they?
I think those politicians who are shouting in favor of Israel, this reflects their intention to be on the wrong side of history. David Lammy, also, as soon as he won the foreign ministry, ministry, he expressed his support to Israel's right for self-defense. And
he did call for a ceasefire, though.
He did call for a ceasefire, but you cannot provide aid while genocide is ongoing. But as we say to our Irish comrades, our day will come, Shuka Allah. And I think the world is awakening, there is awareness, and people will not tolerate this hypocrisy and double standards compared Palestine to Ukraine, for example.
Yousef, Daniel, and Brendan, thank you all so much for your insight and analysis. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.